efficient and being effective. And both of those things have to do with what we do with our time, right? So if we're efficient, we have a really good way of using our time well so that we can make a lot of things happen. And if we're effective, we make a decision to use our time towards the things that matter the most, right? So sometimes we can be efficient, perhaps, but not effective. And I was thinking about times when that is, and I was thinking about what it's like to be a parent, right? If you're a mom or a dad, or a family member taking care of someone, if you're a family caregiver, you may not always be very efficient. You can have good intentions, right? And you can get everybody to put their clothes out the night before, and you can line up the projects so that they're in their folders and ready to go. But the minute life happens, and someone's got a stomach ache, or someone's got the flu, or someone's broken their ankle on the way downstairs, right? It's all different. And it doesn't matter then how efficient we try to be. There's something else that needs tending that's all of a sudden more important and more necessary than our to-do list for the day. It's all been altered because the person is important. The relationship is what matters most. And so sometimes, no matter how efficiently we think we're going to get everything taken care of, when there's a situation that needs to be addressed in the family because something has happened with someone, that all goes out the window. It doesn't matter in the same way anymore. You might still want to try to get everything done and manage well, but the priorities have shifted, right? There's a different kind of thing that suddenly needs to take place. And so we may not always be efficient when we're being really effective. Ministry is a lot like that, and ministry in any kind of way, whether we're ministering to people in our family as parents, or as brothers and sisters, or as children caring for older parents, or for cousins taking care of cousins, or for friends who have adopted people who become like our family, right? And so I think of a poem that I learned the first year that I was here. I don't have it memorized anymore. It's by Robert Bly. It's called something like the new moon, I will live my life. And the new moon is the moon that hasn't got any shine to it at all yet. It's hidden, it's dark, it's obscure. We don't see it yet. We don't know what's going to happen. And in the poem he says, when your privacy is beginning over again, how beautiful are the things you did not notice before. And then he talks about things like the weeds in the field. What just ordinary, common things that if you stop and look at them, which we don't always do because we're too busy and we're rushing and we don't take the time, how beautiful they are, how unique, how amazing and wondrous. Then he says, what no one rushes towards or shouts about, but lives like the new moon. And I'll have to memorize that poem again because there's a line there about cows, and we need that. But he talks about what seems to me rural life, and it sounded to me exactly like parish ministry. What no one rushes towards and shouts about, it's the very fabric of our lives together. It's those day in and day out kinds of things, but it's also, that crisis that just comes and is upon us. And it's about how we live out our days together in the meantime and what we're going to do together with the time that God has graced us with. When Jesus is talking to the disciples, he's on his way to the cross. So his sense of time, I think, has become very, very weighty. He's running out of time. And as he talks to the disciples, he tells them something about what's coming. There will be signs, and they'll be writ large, like the star at Bethlehem that foretold his birth and guided the wise men to the manger. There will be signs, and there will be signs in the heavens, signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And on earth itself there will be distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. This is sounding to me a little bit like the stuff that comes over on my phone. Sounds like the latest climate report. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heaven will be shaken. And then he says, when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. So what Jesus is beginning to tell the disciples is not the same kind of awareness that we receive generally from the world. If we were going to look up a list of the 10 most effective things, or the 10 most efficient things, or the 10 best habits that people have trying to get their work done in the world, this is probably not the way that people would go about it. A disaster is coming. What do? You stand up and you look around. You lift up your head. And you look for God. And you look for God in the trust that because God is near, redemption is near. That there's good news and hope in the middle of the worst possible disaster we could ever imagine, even if we're talking about the end of the world as we know it. So here are the things that we often do when there's a disaster approaching. I do these things too. One thing that we do is to not want to talk about it or not deal with it at all. We want to pretend it away. We want to escape. My mom even says sometimes when she's had enough conversation about grieving, will say, there's a good thing to be said about denial, and she'll say, let's change the subject, right? So I've learned to honor that. There is some wisdom in not dwelling on despair. But Jesus isn't suggesting dwelling on despair. He's suggesting that we can deal with despair because there's hope. There's his hope. And when we come to the worst that we could ever know, that's what's next. The hope and the glory and the beauty and the power of Christ. That's amazing. So another thing that we do besides not dealing with something or not talking about it or running away from it is to not take ownership for any of it, either because we don't know what to do or because we think it's somebody else's mess. Hence, I let you all know this morning, we put the mess in the church. I had some helpers and I really appreciate the help, but I didn't call you out on the mess part because the mess was mine. No, it wasn't your Nanny. She's not messy. She was a helper, but she was not messy. She was trying very hard to keep things cleaned up. But sometimes we don't know how to deal with something, and so we don't take the next right action that might be ours to take, even if it's a simple step. And so I know people who won't go to see someone in a nursing home when someone's got Alzheimer's because they don't think that it matters because that person won't know them or won't remember who they are or they're gone. But it does matter, doesn't it? It matters to you because you know if you've seen them or not. And you've been able to love them and care for them while they're in front of you, whether they know who you are or not, that part doesn't really matter. But we don't always know where to put our grief or what to do with our grief, so we hold back. But what is Jesus saying? He's saying, stand up, look around. See where he is in the middle of the mix, and you'll have the strength to do what you otherwise might not be able to accomplish. Do what you can while you can. Sometimes we don't do something because we say it's not ours. We don't know. Some people say that we can't do anything about the climate or about what's happening in the world with animals or with insects because human beings haven't created that problem. It's a natural problem, it's a natural thing that's happening, so we cannot do anything to fix it. But I think it's kind of like what the parents say when the kids are fighting. I don't care whose fault it is. I want you to stop right now, right? I don't really know that it matters so much whose blame there is for this. The question is there something good that we can do to be helpful here? Is there something we can do together for the sake of the earth and for the sake of us all? Is there something that's ours to do, even in a small, simple way? Is there something we can do to recycle? And I think in this way we're going back to our Mennonite Brethren extended family roots, right? Where everybody is remarkably frugal. We can do that in this church. We do a lot of that already. Tommy takes any scrap metal to get recycled, and then that recycled, the money that comes from the recycling comes back into the offering, or it goes out to the mission, or goes to a worthy cause. So if you have any scrap metal of any kind, bring it to the church, right? That's a simple one. That's really easy. And it's frugal. You know, if I say to you, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without, right? That sounds like our game plan, doesn't it? So this year, these Advent candles, I didn't buy new ones. I happen to have been saving the old ones, and so we had enough that were tall enough that I could just kind of put them all back in their holders again and do the frugal Julie approach. This year, I think that's a good idea, right? It's okay. Otherwise, what would we do? We melt it down, and we'd make other candles, right? We'd, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That's an old time saying, right? That's before the Depression. That's in our DNA here. That's in our bones. We can do that. Those things are ours to do. Not hard. And it's the answer no matter what. That's the answer either way. Jesus gives further instructions, gives us the to-do list and the to-don't list. Another thing we're tempted to do when things seem cataclysmic in our personal lives or in the lives of the world around us, the community around us, we sometimes just give up. It doesn't matter what I do, so I'm just going to have fun. I'm just going to party. The Romans said it this way: eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. In other words, let's just slosh our way to oblivion because it doesn't matter. It's all going to end. We might as well just get, blotto and forget about it. But Jesus does an interesting thing when he says, don't be weighed down by drunkenness and dissipation. He adds worry and anxiety to that list. Don't get drunk on worry. Don't let yourself go careening off the tracks because you're so anxious. Be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day does not catch you unexpectedly like a trap. When we're overly anxious and overly worried, we can't see what's in front of us. Our eyes aren't clear, our minds aren't clear. We're carried away into next week and 3 weeks from now and 5 years from now, and then we're powerless to take the next right action that's in front of us for today. We're somewhere else. We've escaped, but not in a good way. And then when the day comes, we don't know what to do, and we don't know what's right to do because we're so scrambled and so harried and worried. We're not able to be effective. We're not able to be caring for those who are in our charge. And so Jesus calls us to be steady in the middle of even the worst that we could imagine, because he is here with us. And because he's here with us, there's a transformation that's going to take place. Now, I don't think that that means we don't care about this earth at all. Quite the opposite. I think, in fact, that every single generation has been pretty sure at some time that the world might be blown up, or the world might end in some way. 500 years ago, in Martin Luther's time, there were so many wars among all the nations that did this big drawing of, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is a famous drawing. And the bubonic plague was wiping out all kinds of people, and no one had any idea how to stop that plague from killing off entire villages, right? And Martin Luther supposedly said, he may have said this, it sounds like something he would say, he may not have, but the response that is attributed to Martin Luther is one I think that we could emulate. If someone told me the world was going to end tomorrow, I would plant an apple tree. That's the spirit that Jesus is talking about. When you look around and see signs that things are getting worse, and even more worse, we're going to count on hope. Even just a tiny amount of hope. Enough to plant a seed. Enough to do some good. Enough to care for who needs caring. Enough to fix what needs to be fixed. Enough to love with the openness of God. Enough courage to believe that God's grace has got us and will not let us go. Amen. Our next hymn is a little new to us. We've sung it once before. It's number 245.